So a lot of times when men get take the red pill, and start to see females for like female nature in
Yeah.
its like rawest form. A lot of times they're labeled jaded. I think even in a video of you telling the girl what happened, she was like, you have a jaded perspective of, relationships and women now. But it's funny because a lot of the times when women go through the same experiences, it's, oh my gosh, you're so strong for coming out of that. You're a strong, independent woman. Like, we get these we get boasted up, glorified, and get these wonderful labels, feminist labels for seeing men, for seeing males' nature, especially in the Black community. Do you think that's kind of like a ploy from the matriarch setup that we have? Do you think that's like a ploy to, kind of cover up some of our darker behaviors?
I think it comes down to money. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to economics. You know what I'm saying? If women are spending 75 cents to 25 cents that men are spending on average, right? From a business perspective, it would make sense to create content that continues to pander to the consumer. You know what I'm saying? So, that's how you get plus size models, within a body positivity movement. You know what I'm saying? And, I mean, it's such a confusing, topic because on high, you have a lot of different actors that are doing different things to placate in general, in mass. And the thing is that, again, I think part of the benefit within the establishment of male media or Black male media is that it can start to give some credence to the opposite points. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, I just did a video specific to DaBaby and DaBaby. You seen that one?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like, whether or not that video was complete and utter parody or not, I think that what that does is that it just paints a negative picture of men in general in mass, and it doesn't go checked. And that right there is exactly what your question is. Like, that has to be checked. Like, before there was, like back in the 90s and shit like that, you could say like the F word when referring to homosexual people, and no one would bat an eye. You know what I'm saying? That was normal. Go outside, playground banter amongst young boys who were, competing. You know what I'm saying? But the LGBTQ community started, and they started to gain traction because they have their own platforms and started to put pressure on different language. And that's the thing, is that what I think that this sector does is it can put pressure on language that is being used, different tactics that are being used. So I think what really it comes down to is economics.
Okay. Yeah. Now that makes sense, though. It definitely does. And honestly, they make more money with us being separated. Anyways, so that's always going to feed into the gender war, which we're going to get into in a moment. Now, also, I want to touch on this red pill rage again one more time. Just one more time. I see a lot of brothers who get into the red pill thing, red pill manosphere. And I mean, actually, you just, inside your video, Red Pill Exposed, you touched on this in that video. How some of these brothers, like, I mean, they get to a point where, I mean, it's like, even like sisters like myself, who's actually trying to learn, or, I mean, it's like, they're not even trying to hear us at this point. Like, they've gotten to a point where they're just completely almost hating women. It's kind of bad, So do you think that some of these brothers are avoiding, although it is female nature, which is, something, it's a hard pill to swallow, something, something kind of messed up to see, especially if you go through something as yourself. But do you think some of these brothers are missing self-accountability? They're not understanding what they've allowed some of these women to do, and what their actions they could have changed along the way.
Yeah, I mean, and I also did the conversation yesterday with Blue Jasmine, and I don't know if you saw that. I mean, and really what it is at the end of the day is that men enable the behavior. Men enable the behavior, so, when I had a conversation with Sister Shahrazad Ali, and I specifically asked her which gender has to step up to the plate and take control, and she said the men. I already knew what her answer was going to be, but I wanted to get it out of her mouth. Yeah. Right. So the men need to be able to do that, but you can't do that in a red pill rage state. You can't. You don't have what it takes quite yet. You're still in the metamorphosis stage, right? You're still you gotta break up out of that cocoon, right? Because at that stage, then you're no longer focused so much on what's happening outward and pointing a finger at nature, this, that, and the third. And you're taking a look inward and forcing that accountability within yourself. Because like I've said before, there's degrees of the talking points of nature that we talk about that sort of vanish, the more awesome that the man becomes. Right. So because there's also a lot of dudes who just expect that because I got a twig and berries, you should submit to me. And it generally doesn't work like that. You know what I'm saying? You have to have something to submit to, right? You got to have knowledge, leadership potential to submit to. You got to have financial education and foundation and structure within your thinking to submit to, right? She's got to be able to trust that you're going to be able to lead her to the promised land and back again and be relatively secure within that process, right? So, and within a red pill rage state, like you're not there at that particular junction in your developing to be a butterfly.
Do you live in New York right now?
No.
Where you live?
Undisclosed location due to weird people on the internet.
Heard that. Gotcha.
Stay trying to dox me, Zeze. Jesus Christ. Latter-day Saints. Sheesh.
No, but I do want to know, like, what has your experience been with, because I know at least for people like New York women on the East Coast, even here in DC and Maryland, the masculine energy, is very present in a lot of us in the way our mannerisms, the way we move, the way we talk, the way we, interact. And a lot of it is I don't know, up north and East Coast girls, we can be very disrespectful. I don't think I've met a group of more disrespectful women than over here, if I'm being honest.
So let me talk about like this. So coming from New York, right, like you being a New Yorker, you get very used to dealing with masculine energy women so much that you start to like it. You start to like it. You absolutely do. So much so that you think that like that toxicity is necessary, within a relationship. You know what I'm saying? The current relationship that my pops is actually in a relationship right now with his high school sweetheart. And one thing that they always talk about is that they never argue. Like a lot of us have convinced ourselves that that toxicity is what's necessary for a good relationship. Like you got to have the ultimate lows as well as the incredible highs. And I just don't believe that. And I would say to dudes, like, that's the number one thing. Like if you find yourself constantly arguing with her, there's constantly an issue, then you got to do your best to try to remove yourself up out of that situation. Because that energy is just going to be an anchor within your life. You won't be able to reach your true ultimate form of yourself, your final form, your ultra instinct form until you relieve some of that anchor. So I left New York wanting and expecting that behavior and that energy. And it took me years to understand that is generally not what women want to be at. They typically generally do not want to be exhibiting masculine energy and or behavior. They would love to be feminine. But the issue also too is that a lot don't know how to do it, right? Because if they, saw their single mother who probably enacted more masculine behaviors in order to protect, right? Like, which has to happen if the man is not there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if that's what they watched, right? If they saw dudes coming in and out the house, right? Like, it just, on top of, modern day feminism, modern day sexual liberation movement, like all of these different things that are happening, the media, the songs, the this, the that, right? Like, it pushes a lot of information into young women's minds that can, especially in New York, especially in New York. I would say like, it changes depending upon where you grew up at. Like if you grew up in the South, you know what I'm saying, and you was raised in a much more traditional family, you know what I'm saying, and you saw it happening, you'd have a much different temperament, right? Much different temperament than being raised in a concrete jungle. You know what I'm saying? So, but at the same time, there's disrespect that happens from, women, from masculine energy, but then you also have disrespect from emotional ass dudes. You know what I'm saying? And that's just a real thing. We got too many of our young men that, act off of emotion. They react as opposed to respond to situations. You know what I'm saying? So I try within my content to go over content like that as well. Like I just reacted to a young man who was in a clearly toxic relationship with his baby mother, and she tried to murder him by running him over in a car.
Oh, I seen that.
You saw that?
Yeah.
And this brother was just acting like it was another day in the office, right?
Yeah.
He's at the level of toxicity where he probably likes that shit. He probably craves that toxic energy from her. And it's just, you know, another day at the office. So, you know, there's a lot of PTSD that we all got to take time to be able to recover from the experiences that we had in our life.
Do you think that it is necessary, you know, for especially young men, to kind of shift them into their focus, for them to kind of get not even if it's not necessarily something directly towards them with the woman, you know, whether it's getting hurt, something as egregious as what you went through, but even seeing that from a friend or from their father or from a brother, do you think that is necessary for them to see like how far female nature can go, you know, how far women can go, you know, if we get too emotional, if we're in a toxic state?
Yeah. So I think it's important to, I don't think all young men need to absolutely like experience that type of pain. I think like you can learn from experience, you can learn from other people's mistakes, you can learn from information that you can find online, whether it be, you know, the content on YouTube or podcast or what have you. But I do think that there has to be a fundamental shift in the Black community. We are absolutely a matriarchal community because of the 70% single Black mother rate, which is 20 to 30% higher than the next than any other race, right? So I think that there's absolutely a problem with that, and I do think that there's a lot of young men, you know, that are confused, you know, when it comes to how to deal with women, right? Like, and they get angry, you know. So, but I think at the same time, what's bubbling up on YouTube, and I think is ever more important, is this presence of Black male media, right?
Yeah.
And I think because it is so new, right? It's so new because there really hasn't been a space for male media, and it's not been a space so much that women in general, in mass, think that men don't want to talk about things, right? They don't want to share things that are on their mind. They don't want to, you know, detail kind of the things that they're going through. And I think that what this sector of YouTube absolutely shows is that there's absolutely, you know, spaces to be able to do that. I think that because of the single mother rate within the Black community, what you start to see now is an extreme influx of young dudes that come in that are just thirsty for information. They're just thirsty for knowledge, right? So, I mean, and there's absolutely a market for it, so much so that you start to see some of these mainstream media entities reaching out to bubbling YouTube creators, right? To see what's good, to see what's popping. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, to promote ads on channels and stuff like that. So it's definitely there, and I don't think it's going anywhere. It may slightly shift as it goes off into the future, right? Especially as it gets more eyes that kind of come down into the sector. You start to see some of the eyes that recently have come down, like, you know, I did a reaction on Dr. Umar Johnson, Charlamagne the God, or like the Breakfast Club was mentioning some folks that are down in here, you know, and just other names like that. So I think that what's established right now, from a media perspective, doesn't push a lot of the ideals that are right over here. And I think that there's a lot of young men that are hungry for this information over here because it doesn't necessarily placate to them. It doesn't necessarily pander to them, right? They get different messages than what they've ever experienced before.